What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day, morning, noon, night, whatever it is for you guys. Hope you're having the best day you could possibly be having. And if you're new here, guys, thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of the day to come hang out with us, sit back and enjoy a good little video. So, guys, before we even start talking about the video for today, I've got to get like a huge shout out thank you. Thank you to the Warhammer community, guys. Y'all are some of the nicest, most genuine people that I have interacted with on the internet ever. If I have a question about something, y'all take the time out of y'all's day to sit back and write me extensive details about this. Guys, that's amazing. Y'all are so amazing. And when I ultimately sound stupid about some of the things I say on here because I'm so brand new to this, y'all sit back, educate me, and you're not berating, you don't talk down on me because I don't know what I'm talking about. Y'all sit back and you educate me. You don't know me from a guy down the street. Y'all sit back and take the time out of y'all's day to help me out. And guys, that's just amazing. With the state of the world the way it is, you don't find genuine people like that anymore. And I've just got to say kudos to you guys. Y'all are awesome. Thank y'all so much. But with that being said, guys, we're going to be talking about the 10 weapons that are needlessly dark. When I was doing the 10 worst jobs, that popped up and I was like, dang, that sounds cool. And then I had somebody say I should watch it. So I think we're going to get into it, guys. Now, this is by Weshammers. I've never checked him out before. I've heard that he's a really cool guy. So, without that, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Ready?
So Warhammer 40K is famous for a lot of things, but one of its biggest claims to fame is being unapologetic.
All right, guys, I think I'm going to like this guy already. Mr. West, I like your hair. I like the bandana. And as you can see, I like the beard. I'm trying to catch up to you myself, sir. Kudos to you on the good-looking beard. Let's keep going.
Bombastic and over the top. This is a science fiction franchise where you have roided up space dudes in power armor charging into the enemy with a whole bunch of chainsaw swords. Badass. For no better reason other than it's super badass. But believe it or not, there are weapons out there that make charging into the enemy, waving chainsaws around, screaming praise to the God Emperor look, honestly, pretty timid by comparison. Some could say they're needlessly dark. From living weapons that fire voracious brain-eating worms, to laboratory instruments that cause your flesh to grow out of control until you explode in a giant gore shower. These weapons are pretty dark, but kind of hilariously edgy and awesome in their own right. So let's take a look at 10 of the most needlessly dark weapons in the entire 40K universe. But first I'm going to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, and then we'll dive headfirst into the grimdark. Stay tuned.
Kicking off this list at number 10, we have the Adeptus Mechanicus Torsion Cannons. So the Torsion Cannon is a gun used by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and it's normally mounted on their battle servitors. And on one hand, this thing is actually pretty cool and creative for a science fiction weapon. But on the other hand, it is unnecessarily brutal. When fired, the Torsion Cannon energizes itself and fires 3 sequential energy beams, which lock onto their target and hold it in place. The barrel of the cannon then begins to rotate, and the matter fields that were generated by the gun begin to relentlessly twist in opposite directions, the torsion created by it literally ripping the target apart. And no matter what it's fired at, whether it be a Tyranid Hive Tyrant, a Heretic's Rhino, or even a human being, chunks of it are sent flying in every direction. And being ripped apart by energy beams is a pretty terrible way to go. And I may have never personally worked in a machine shop, but I've been told that lathes are one of the most dangerous things that you can work with, and getting your hand stuck in one of these things is a pretty common workplace accident. So imagine 3 of them being smushed together and then made into a ranged weapon. It's pretty awful stuff. Landing at number 9 is the Harlequins Kiss. So we know the Harlequins Kiss doesn't look that intimidating at first glance, but looks can be deceiving, and I promise you this is one of the most terrifying weapons in the entire galaxy. You see, it consists of a long sharpened tube that is connected to a housing unit, and inside of that chamber is a 100-meter long monofilament wire, meaning that it is a single molecule in diameter. It is inconceivably sharp, and surprisingly insanely durable. When activated by the bearer punching the weapon forward, the wire is released through the tube and forcefully injected inside the victim's body. All 100 meters will then violently thrash around inside of the target, liquefying them from the inside out. By retracting their arm, the wire then quickly coils back inside of the device, ready to be deployed once again. Mercifully, death by this thing is pretty quick, and it does leave the user vulnerable for a few seconds. I would say that the only saving grace here is that this thing is primarily a melee device, and can't really be used at range. Unfortunately, this isn't the only use of monofilament technology employed by the Eldar. In at number 8 is the Eldari Doomweaver. So if you thought the Harlequins Kiss was bad, the Doomweaver is way worse. So the Doomweaver is an anti-infantry weapon normally mounted on top of an Eldar grav tank known as a Night Spinner. It uses the same monofilament technology, but on a much grander scale. You see, the weapon works by launching so much of this filament into the air that it appears like it is releasing a massive black cloud. And I know what you're thinking. There's nothing scary about a cloud cannon. But you listen to me when I tell you that this isn't any ordinary cloud. You see, what gives it its distinctive black color is actually thousands of miles of this monofilament fiber, spread out like a massive floating net. As this massive web of razor wire floats down to the battlefield, any infantry that get caught in it are absolutely eviscerated. And the worst part is the cloud actually sticks around on the ground for a while, making it impossible for troops to move through without getting dissected. Thankfully, the fiber can't stay suspended in the air indefinitely, and eventually will sink to the ground and be safe to move over. But the fact that this cannon can do what the Harlequins Kiss does on a massive scale is truly horrifying.
Does it ever get
In 7th place, we have the Tyranid Devourers. So I'm gonna be honest with you. This list could realistically be made up exclusively of Tyranid weapons. They're all absolutely insane and needlessly dark. And it's not really fair to call them weapons, as they're actually living creatures, and an extension of the Tyranid.
Yeah, especially when he talked about the one gun that shot flesh-eating, or not maybe flesh-eating maggots out, spat out acid and just crawl in. Ew. Freaking Tyranids, bugs, man. This world, fantasy world, they suck all the way around.
Organism that wields it. But of all the crazy nightmare fuel that the Tyranids bring to war, I think the humble Devourer definitely takes the cake for me as something you absolutely don't want to fight against. You see, the Devourer is a type of gun that is filled with parasitic worms. These worms live and breed inside of the weapon. You can think of it more like a beehive and less like a gun. But I'm gonna call it a gun to make things simple. When the Tyranid wielding it is ready to fire, they will release an electrical shock generated from deep inside of their body that travels through the barrel of the gun. This awakens the worms from their dormant state and whips them up into a killing frenzy. The worms will then be ejected out of the barrel at ludicrously high speeds, and when they make contact with the target, they'll immediately begin to burrow inside of them insanely quickly, chewing through flesh and bone.
That
These
reminds
worms move
me of the
insanely
Mummy,
fast, and have evolved to wreak havoc on the victim's nervous system. They will attempt to target and burrow towards the brain as quickly as possible. Once they reach the brain, they will begin to devour it, eating the victim alive, and rendering them completely helpless against the oncoming Tyranid swarm. And armored targets don't really fare much better against this thing, as if the worms collide with something hard enough to rupture them, they'll explode into a splash of acid. And this acid is corrosive enough to eat through that armor, creating an opening for the surviving worms to burrow inside. There exist a lot of different variations of this weapon, and some of them are small enough to be wielded by the basic troops known as gaunts, meaning that you could have thousands of these things being fired at you at once. But there are also variants that are wielded by much larger Tyranid creatures, and the worms inside of those are even scarier.
Bigger?
Coming in at number 6 is the shock attack gun.
Like we know, guys.
So we need to talk about one of the craziest and most horrifying inventions the orcs have ever made. It's called the shock attack gun. And on one hand, it's the silliest weapon in the galaxy, but it's also incredibly effective, if not kinda unpredictable. You see, the shock attack gun works by generating a sequence of 2 portals. The first appears right in front of the bearer, while the other materializes wherever the individual has aimed the cannon. Using a vacuum system, the wielder sucks up a bunch of tiny orc-like creatures known as snotlings, which are basically smaller versions of the Gretchen. They will then be fired through the gun and shot through the first portal. And you see, that portal leads directly into the warp. Basically hell if you're new to 40K. So the snotlings are then sent through a journey through hell with no protection. And the experience is said to be so horrifying that the snotlings go absolutely batshit insane. Their tiny minds being completely incapable of processing the sheer overwhelming terror of the warp. When they exit through the second portal, they go into a berserker's frenzy, clawing, beating, and stabbing wildly at anything in the vicinity. And having the enemy fire hundreds of insane goblins at you is scary enough, but that second portal is pretty unpredictable, and it can appear anywhere the orc aimed it. And the orcs don't have the best accuracy. Sometimes the portal will materialize inside of a rock, which kills all of the goblins instantly when they come out. Sometimes the portal will materialize way up in the air and it will just rain snotlings down on you. Sometimes the snotlings don't survive their journey through the warp, and the only thing that comes out of the second portal is just a tidal wave of blood and guts. But sometimes the portal can materialize inside of a person, causing a whole bunch of frenzied goblins to burst out of your chest like that scene from the movie Alien. And knowing that you're about to be killed by a bunch of insane snotlings is pretty scary in its own right, but seeing them burst out of your comrade's chest has got to be, at the very least, a little demoralizing.
Steve, you okay?
Claiming the number 5 spot is the disease known as the Walking Pox. So the Walking Pox is actually a disease, and not necessarily a weapon, but it is utilized by the Legion of Space Marines known as the Death Guard, who are masters of biochemical and disease-based warfare. And the Death Guard have hundreds of different insanely destructive and demonic diseases under their control. And needless to say, they make for some pretty potent weapon. The one known as the Walking Pox may seem simple enough. Once infected, the victim will begin to rot and decay, and they'll quickly turn into what is known as a poxwalker. You can think of them like plague zombies. Now, what makes this particularly scary is that the Walking Pox doesn't just kill its victims, it takes over their bodies. And even worse, it leaves their mind completely intact. So it's basically like locked-in syndrome, where the victim is forced to watch themselves turn on their allies. They must bear witness to all of the terrible and horrible things the Death Guard makes them do.
So it's kind of like a servitor.
And having locked-in syndrome is scary enough, but then being forced to murder everyone you've ever loved by a bunch of crazy diseased space marines, I think easily makes the list for needlessly dark. The Walking Pox is also insanely contagious, as it's not just a disease of the body, but of the soul. And it can spread from direct contact with an afflicted individual, but the more peculiar way that it spreads is through sound. Just hearing the grotesque groans and moans of the poxwalkers is enough for the virus to enter your body.
What?
Kind of similar to how diseases like malaria can be transmitted by a mosquito, the Walking Pox hijacks the emotion of dread and uses it like a disease vector. And once that feeling of inescapable certainty of your own death enters your heart, so too does the Walking Pox. Meaning that once unleashed, outbreaks will quickly spread through an enemy's defenses, leading to an inevitable victory for the Death Guard. In at number 4, we have the Ossifactor. Just like with the Tyranids, this entire list could be comprised solely of Dark Eldar tech, as they're a species that is known for being particularly cruel. But in the interest of being fair, I've selected a couple that I think are particularly dark. And I actually found a pair that kind of go hand in hand. The first is known as the Ossifactor. And just like with the Walking Pox, it's not actually a weapon. It's a tool used by the Drukhari flesh crafters known as the homunculi. It's traditionally used to accelerate the bone growth of their flesh puppets and monstrous constructs, such as the racks, grotesques, and even the massive floating pain engines, to name a few. However, particularly cruel homunculi have used it on the battlefield. In combat, the ostitic waves that this thing generates are cranked up to 11, and the victim is given a massive overdose of the skeletal twisting energy. This causes their bone system to buckle and violently grow out of control, their spine jutting and ripping through their skin, their ribcage elongating and bursting through their chest, and their skulls growing so rapidly that their face rips and literally falls off. Sometimes death comes mercifully quick, but other times, the bone growth doesn't end up puncturing any of the vital organs. So with their organ system intact, the victim is forced to stay alive for several grueling minutes before all of their bones grow out of control and burst from their body. Unfortunately, there's really no telling how an individual will react to this thing. And much to the twisted delight of the homunculi, every opportunity that the Ossifactor is used is an incredibly rewarding research opportunity.
That's cool.
The homunculi are scientists of pain first and foremost, and are not necessarily soldiers, normally letting their constructs do the fighting for them. However, when they do take to the field, whether they actually want to go to war or they're looking at it as an opportunity for research, their presence is truly horrifying. Coming in at number 3 is the Flesh Gauntlets. Now, another one of their tools is known as the Flesh Gauntlet. And this takes the appearance of a handheld claw weapon, each finger ending in a long needle-like syringe. These syringes can inject any manner of vile concoction that the wielder has equipped them with a single strike. Most commonly, they're filled with an electrosteroid that forces rapid and unnatural growth of flesh and organ, making the target literally outgrow their own skin. Ow. As their insides swell to ludicrous proportion and the target explodes in a gory and horrific spectacle. Much like with the ossifactor, when this is used as a weapon, the victim is given a dose of this stuff 100 times greater than they would normally get in the homunculi's experiments. Now, both of these things aren't exclusively used by the homunculi. They're often equipped on their creations as well. But I can only imagine what kind of horrible edgelord homunculus would attempt to equip both the Flesh Gauntlet and the ossifactor at the same time. In at number 2, we have the Hellblades.
Ooh.
A Hellblade is a sword wielded by the lesser demons of Khorne, which are known as bloodletters. And the weapons match their wielder's name quite well, as no mortal-made armor can protect from their incredibly sharp cutting edge. Now, these weapons are said to have been sharpened by hatred itself, and what makes them so scary is that once struck, the target will immediately begin to bleed out, as the demons that are bound within the Hellblades disable the blood's ability to clot, meaning that even just a shallow cut will produce a torrent of blood to flow from the victim like a waterfall. And the blades don't just cut the victim's flesh, they actually rend apart their soul. It's said that these weapons can't be wielded by mortals, but there have been a few examples of it happening. And every time it does, the wielder begins to go more and more insane, as the blade's corrupting influence causes them to crave more and more bloodshed, eventually turning them into a mindless killing machine. And I guess it makes sense for soldiers of the Blood God to use weapons that make you just bleed out forever, as Khorne cares not from where the blood flows, only that it flows. And at the number 1 spot, we have the Sun Snuffers. So you may be aware that there was a period in mankind's history known as the Dark Age of Technology. Now, this was a time period that lasted from the 15th to the 25th millennia and ended with the coming of the Age of Strife, where massive warp storms materialized and basically cut off all of the human worlds from being able to interact with one another. But during the Dark Age of Technology, humanity created amazing and horrifying machines. This was the peak of mankind's technological achievements, and one of their creations was known simply as Sun Snuffers. They were these massive coiled mechanical monstrosities of impossible size, said to be so large that they dwarfed even the rings of Saturn. Now, these mechanical abominations were used to literally strangle and snuff out stars, like wetting your fingers and pinching a lit candle wick, but on a much larger scale. Now, information on this time period is incredibly rare, and we don't necessarily know how these things were used or when mankind would see them as even necessary. But it is said that during the machine uprising in the 23rd millennium, known as the Cybernetic Revolt, that many of mankind's terrible creations were turned against them, meaning it's very possible that the sons of many human civilizations were snuffed out by the Men of Iron, killing untold billions. And whether or not any of these things are still out there intact, we don't really know. But hopefully we will never see one of these things be used again.
I would hope not.
And there you go, that's 10 of the most horrifying weapons in all of 40k. Which ones do you think are the most terrifying and why? And do you think they're needlessly dark, or do you think they're kind of cool? And this universe is filled with terrifying creations, so let me know in the comments if there's one that I missed, or if there's one that you think deserves a mention in a future video. Because if I'm being honest, I could make 100 more of these because there's a lot of really scary stuff out there.
Please do.
Once again, thanks to my patrons for making this possible. If you like the content that I make, then consider joining us on Patreon and making a pledge. It helps me keep the lights on. Until next time, everybody, happy wargaming.
Alrighty, guys. Well, that was Weshammer's 10 weapons that were needlessly dark. That was pretty cool. I like Wes. He's pretty cool guy. I was about to say he made that really easy to follow. It was really cool to watch. Very interesting. So now, guys, the 10 weapons that are needlessly dark. I would say the Sun Snuffer sounds pretty bad, but I mean, if they snuff out the sun, you're just SOL. Period, right? I mean, unless something's different in this universe, yeah. But as far as like melee weapons go, God, I can't talk right now. I would say, obviously the bloodletter. That, I mean, you get a little cut, and I tell you what, that thing don't stop bleeding, and you just bleed and bleed and bleed out. God, I'll tell you how bad that sucks. I was at work the other night, opening a liquor bottle, and there's a piece of glass missing. So as I go to turn the top without looking down, it cuts my finger. I don't know if y'all can see it. I'll even know. I don't know which finger it is. That finger cut me like there all the way down. And that thing didn't stop bleeding for like 2 hours. Imagine that just keep going. That sucks. But I would really say that out of all of those, the ossifier, that sounds pretty dang bad. So, they hit you with this. Your bones start twisting, growing, shooting out of your body. You also have the possibility that, as your bones grow, twist, misshape, they don't actually puncture any of your vital organs. So you have to sit there, writhing in pain, for several minutes as your bones continue to grow, until they forcibly explode from your body. Yeah, I think that one might take the cake, guys. I mean, obviously, getting ripped apart by light beams, yeah, that sucks. That ripping skin, yeah, ripping your whole body apart, yeah, that sucks. The Harlequins Kiss, that sucks too, but, I mean, at least it'll be a quick death, so, it's not that bad. But guys, the Tyranids. The Tyranids are just the worst. Flesh-eating maggots that explode on contact if your surface is hard enough. What the fuck, guys? What the fuck? We all know, in the end, it's going to be the Necrons and the Tyranids. Nobody else stands a chance. So what are we going to do, guys? Who... Are we going to side with either one of them? Or are we're SOL? I guess we'll find out later, guys. But with that being said, guys, that is going to be the end of the video for tonight. Now, I do have some more content coming up for you this week, because I have heard that they have just released a new Space Marine Legion, the Voltan. Now, I'm pretty sure that one's a longer video, so I'm probably going to push that one back towards the weekend, just so everybody can see it when they get off. But, like I said, guys, we got a lot of new content coming for you soon. Go ahead, if you got something you want me to watch, leave it down in the comments. I've got a list growing by the day. By the day. Y'all guys are so freaking... I'm literally never going to run out of content for Warhammer. Unless, I don't know, the internet explodes or something. But, with that being said, guys, this is the end of the video for today. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And before you head out that door, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for me. I think we knocked it down to like 60 subs to 1,000. We're almost there, guys. Let's get there together. Warhammer strong. With that being said, guys, peace, love, happiness to you. Have a great rest of your day. And always, guys, be easy.